everybody, thanks for watching. I know there are a lot of fly tying videos out there and I appreciate you clicking on this one. So this pattern, doesn't really have a name, adult crane fly I suppose. That's what it is. I haven't seen any patterns exactly like this one. This one has a foam body, but it's not too difficult to tie. It does take a little while though. So I will explain the materials as I go and put the recipe in the description. So I'm tying this on a number 8 terrestrial hook. So you see the little bend on it. I'm using brown 70 denier UTC. Lay a base down to about where the barb is, where the main part of the hook starts to bend. And first component on this thing is just some very small dry fly Grizzly hackle. This would probably be about a size 16 if you were using it as a dry fly hackle. I have a little bit of a stem there, so let's cut that off. Probably doesn't matter, it's going to be buried in a little bit of foam. So this one, tanned 2mm thick foam, cut to a slight taper right there just to give you a lower tie-in point. So catch that in, just enough of it so it's not going to break when we start wrapping it. And bury that in here. Let's get your thread back up to the front. And now just start wrapping this. It doesn't have to be real tight. You don't have to worry about overlapping too much. And you won't really notice the segmentation, but there are little grooves in here which will help the hackle when we wind that. When we palmer it up through there, it will sit in those little valleys and come out nicely if we do everything right. So a couple of tight turns there to get that caught in. Now, so just take your hackle and let's see, go around there and wind it the same way you wound your foam, so it does sit in those little grooves. Now the fibers are going to point forward. That's just the way it is when you have to. There's nothing you can do about that. You can't flip the feather over or you know, try to wind from the other way, because you've got to go in these little grooves. But that's fine. It does not affect the fly at all. You know, like a typical woolly booger, you'd have the hackle slightly pointing back. Okay. Now, what takes so long about these flies is tying knots in pheasant tail, individual pheasant tail fibers. So here's one with the knot in it. Now for the first two, we're going to tie on right where we stop that foam body. So just a couple wraps right there and position it if you need to. That looks okay. Now if I can grab this other one and put it on the opposite side. Loose to medium wraps at first until you get your position right, and those look fine there. So a couple of securing wraps there before we snip the butt ends of these pheasant tail fibers off. Now for the wings of this thing, see one of these tails or legs is kind of sticking all up on me. That is okay. So the wings of these, just more dry fly hackle, smaller feathers, dun colored, and tie them, pull a couple of fibers off to give me a tie-in point. angling back, but not as far back as the legs are. So if you need to put a wrap behind it, you can take a look at that. That's about the angle I like right there. Do the same thing on the other side. See, they're a little bit crisscrossed on the top. I'm going to put another wrap behind this one just to be safe. Okay. Now let's go ahead and got a couple fibers sticking forward. That's from that wing. I'm going to go ahead and trim these off if I can here. And that's good enough. So next up, just a small little bit of dubbing. Now this is not really part of the head yet, but it helps the next legs to angle out. So just a tight noodle, not very much. Not building it up really, just kind of going to make it a little bit easier for the next wings. Now I've got a little bit of fuzz coming out of there. That's fine. So these front wings, I will tie them on, try to, two at a time up front. If you can get them angled, laying how you'd like. Now Jim Masura does the front ones one at a time, and I've done that too, but I think it's just as easy to do this. You can position the legs and we'll wrap a little more dubbing in a minute, and you can always split your thread through there to get some separation on those front two legs. Now one of the cool things about this a crane fly pattern, if you've ever seen a dead one floating on top of the water, their legs are all over the place anyway, so if you don't get the legs perfect, I wouldn't worry about it. Now same thing with these next two legs. I'm going to try to get these on this side. And prop the front one up just a little bit with a wrap behind it. You can position them as you go or at the end is fine. Now when I did that one, my front one, I had that one go to the back. So let's trim these butt ends off and see what we've got. Okay, we got the two on the back. They're going about where we want. They're fine. The next two legs, they're a little bit under the wing. That's okay. Front two legs are sticking out about where we'd like it. So we're almost done. Fly doesn't take a real long time. Again, the longest part of it is tying knots and pheasant tail fibers. That's not always easy. So just a small bit of dubbing, tiny little noodle right here. And like I mentioned, if you needed to, you could wrap this dubbing behind those legs right there and just do a little figure eight and try to bring those front legs out a little bit. In this case, they're still sticking out. I might have a little bit more dubbing than I like on here, but we're going to stick with it. dubbing. I always say dubbing. So, okay. I think that's fine. Now let's just clean up the head there, make sure we don't close up our eye. And then whip finish and head cement. Oh well, we will have a little bit of trimming. We don't want these legs as long as they are right now. So there's your whip finish. Snip your thread, and then just a little bit off of the tips of these 6 legs. And there you have it. An adult crane fly with a foam body. Most of them I've seen tied do not have the foam body. That foam body and the palmered grizzly hackle there gives it a lot more flotation. And one of the things that grizzly hackle does that I like with this pattern is it keeps these wings, when they get wet, if you didn't have that standoff, they might stick to the side of the fly. So this helps keep the wings splayed out, and it's a pretty effective pattern. Again, it's not a real quick tie. You don't knock out a dozen of these in an hour, but then again, you rarely would need a dozen. Not too many. It would take too much space in your box. And how often every year do you use a crane fly or a dragonfly pattern? Probably 2 or 3 times a season. That's it. Special occasions, I suppose. Anyway, that's all. If you've watched this far, I really appreciate it. I hope you will consider subscribing. So that's all, folks. Thanks again.